Alrighty, here it goes. This is my first stab at recording video and recording audio at the same time. So I don't know if I even have any clue of what I'm doing. I'm audio recording on my computer, video recording from my phone, and let's just see what kind of magic we can make happen. The intention is obviously to get this now on YouTube in addition to all of my podcast streams. So let's see how it goes. So all the viewers out there, please forgive the attention to my computer. And the audio listeners, please forgive me if something seems out of whack, because it's probably just the fact that I'm staring myself as I'm filming this. And without further ado, I will get right into it. So today I am going a little bit into a realm of something that I am definitely not an expert at, but I have an opinion on. As with most of us, that happens. And what I want to talk about today is my perspective on plastics. So this idea came a little while ago just from my natural inclination to be very observant about others. And what I realized is that there is so much hypocrisy going on in the environmental world that I just wanted to bring some attention to it. So, in order to do so, I would like to first of all sort of give some context and predicate this rant and let you know sort of where I'm coming from with this. In general, I would not say that I'm an overly extreme or passionate person when it comes to environmental issues. That being said, I do care about them. And independently, I know that I have consciously made efforts here and there to be aware of like what I'm doing with regards to the environment, whether that's throwing things out, recycling, reusing, reducing, that kind of deal. And I just remember being at some point along the way more conscious than my family, because I was finding myself trying to like recycle things when it wasn't a common thing to do in my household, and so on and so forth. So just to let you know, not sort of in that world of really pushing for projects, but I do appreciate that it's an issue. And I do appreciate that like we can do better. Not we. I'm not going to preach. I can do better. People around me that I see can do better. So that's sort of long-term in the past where I'm coming from. In addition to that, later on in my life, I had a very interesting interaction in the time that I spent living in Cuba. So I say this because this brings up a really interesting topic of sort of perspective. And so not just sharing my perspective with you guys, but also sort of keeping things in perspective to see like where the judgments that you're making are coming from, and sort of realizing that they might be a little bit out of context or not taking the perspective of the situation that you're making a comment about. That was a whole lot of blabber. I'm gonna give a specific example of what I mean. So while I was living in Cuba, it was very clearly and quickly evident to me that Cuba does not have this national concept of recycling. Coming from Canada, that was a very stark contrast for what I was used to, especially given the times of like, even though being from Calgary, it's not the most advanced system of recycling or awareness or whatever, it was still by this point that by the time that I went to Cuba, it was still a thing. Recycling, curbside recycling, that kind of thing was already established. And so it was then, and therefore, and Canada in general is a pretty aware country, I would say. I also think we have an abundance of resources, which makes us a little bit less concerned, or sort of like the urgency isn't maybe as obvious. Um, anyway, so there I am in Cuba, quickly realizing that things like recycling, things like, you know, yeah, separating, basically, I would say recycling was not a big thing there. And what I also noticed very quickly is how many comments I would hear from foreigners, extranjeros, about the problems with that and the issues with that, especially working in a school where you're trying to build awareness within students about important issues in society. And clearly, like, that was an easy one to target. Cuba doesn't do a lot for their country in terms of recycling. So I did find that very interesting. And what I also became very aware of is the fact that although Cuba does a really pitiful job of recycling, their reusing is completely impeccable. Like, it's truly fascinating the amount of things that Cubans can find second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth uses for. And that, to me, you know what? By the end of my time there, I almost had a greater respect for the way that the mindset of Cubans was as compared to what the general mindset of, I would say, Canadians was. And the reason that I say that is because, granted, I don't believe that Cubans did this kind of for the environment. I think they did it more out of means of necessity and lack of resources, and with the need of buying, not being able to buy things, but needing something. They would very clearly find ways to reuse things. Like, and I give an example often because it was the first moment I really recognized this. Was I saw someone a server waiting on a table, and instead of using a spray bottle filled with cleaning chemicals to wash the table, he had a reused plastic water bottle, and it was filled with obviously like a soap water mixture, and he was cleaning the table with that. And it's really, really interesting because, I mean, what I recall about the whole concept of like reduce, reuse, recycle is that it went in that order. And so if you look at it that way, the idea of reusing, which is what they're doing, and inherently reducing their use of bottles, was actually kind of above and beyond what Canadians do, which is like a pretty, I would say, in my opinion, I don't know if this is statistically correct, but I would think by my observation that Canadians would jump quicker to recycling as opposed to finding another use for something. So super interesting kind of context to come from there. And like, that was the first of many examples that I could think of. You would often see, I mean, that idea of plastic water bottles was a super common thing to see. You would just, like, I'm trying to even think of, of course on the spot I can't think, but like, okay, so funny, on the plastic water bottle thing, what I would see is, like, instead of somebody buying and going out and buying a funnel, they would cut off the top of a plastic water bottle and use that as a funnel. So, like, and just these very simple things that I would say, is kind of beyond us now in more developed societies, because you just don't, I don't know, you think of like going out and buying something. So I could probably go on about a lot of different examples that I saw in Cuba, but what I think this addresses is how it's really important to think about like where you're coming from, and going back to that idea of having perspective. Because just as someone could go to Cuba from Canada and say, oh, shame on Cubans for not ever for not having established a good recycling program, you could look at them and say, number one, there's no strong education sort of fundamental idea that that's what people should be doing. Why? This is my theory. My theory is that Cubans in general are still on this level of taking care of themselves and needing to fulfill their needs, that the idea of taking care of the environment comes after that. And I really don't think in many Cubans' minds, in the environment they're living in, that they can conceptualize without further education or justify taking time to recycle something when it's sort of like putting in this extra effort for something that they just can't like attend to. And maybe that sounds crazy, but like, or like maybe I'm way off, but I just think that like me as a Canadian I'm able to think about being conscious about what I'm doing, because my like well-being is not, every day in question. And so I actually found by the end of it, I was almost more resentful, or like built up this sort of inner frustration towards people who would come there and criticize Cubans without sort of having any context or putting anything in perspective. And I really think that this is a way of addressing a lot of problems in the world. And I think that having that perspective of where you're at, like where you're coming from, where other people are coming from, that allows you to really dip into like how to solve problems, So yeah, that I guess is a long story of where I'm coming from. And then more recently, something that's inspired this thought and rant is that I started about a year and a bit ago working at Starbucks. And I am, like, I'm not here to bash Starbucks. Starbucks is the example I have where I'm sure a lot of other places could be guilty of the same, if not worse, if not less, but the same general issues. I quickly became very disgruntled and internally kind of like irritated as to the profound amount of waste that goes on at Starbucks. And the thing that always irked me is not only just that I would be in Starbucks and I would see so much like, you drop some cups on the floor, you have to throw them out. You go through a bunch of lids, and like the worst is when they're not even used. So there's the one level of people buying drinks in disposable cups. That's a thing that comes with society. But then there's the second level of like going through all this waste, plastics and blah, blah, blah. And then like even further is the waste that's like unnecessary waste. So, just having stuff that like is caused by whatever, like sanitation rules. I get it. But like that stuff really got to me actually. So that like being in that environment all the time, which was a quite a big contrast from like being in a school environment where I was a teacher, and that like you had this idea that, everyone was kind of somehow working towards doing good for the environment. And then contrasting to this place where people are kind of ignorant, like myself included, whether that's forced, whether that like, it's just what the environment is conducive to. So that's sort of how this whole thing started, I think, developing, because I just started thinking about stuff more and realizing and putting things in, in perspective. So just a couple stories and stuff to give you an idea of my opinion on this issue is actually they're all from Starbucks. So the first of them is, I remember this girl came up to the counter. She had an order of about four drinks, something like that. So she had ordered her 4 drinks, and she, like when you order a certain amount of drinks, you're like, oh, you must want a tray, like to carry that. She goes, no. So then gets her drinks, goes over to the back where she's putting in the sugars and the teas and whatever. So this girl has now gone from ordering 4 drinks, probably not all for herself, but orders these 4 drinks, puts sleeves on all of them, which is not an obligation and not done at Starbucks by standard for espresso beverages. So she made a choice to put what's that called? A sleeve on. and then is going over to the condiments bar where she's like, you know, filling her drink with all these sugar, like, so emptying sugar packets, blah, blah, blah. So I'm kind of like watching her go through this process okay, now I remember. So at this point, she had gotten a tray, okay? So she has a tray. She has like 4 drinks, some food items, and is like dressing up her drink. So first of all, she's come to Starbucks. Like, that's just a wasteful environment. It just is. Then she's like put on the sleeves, which she chose to do. And then she put them in a tray, which, like, I understand you need a tray. And she has all these food items. So I'm watching her and, like, she's struggling. And I just say to her, do you want a bag for your food? And she goes to me, oh, no. I don't need a bag. I'm trying to, you know, like, think about the environment. And, like, I literally, I was, like, in shock. I'm thinking to myself, and this is the moment where I'm like, you know, learning to grow is like, I wish I'd come up with a way to effectively communicate my thoughts, which are like, holy shit, you've come to Starbucks, you've ordered these drinks in these disposable cups, ordered all these food items in all this plastic wrapping, and you're worried that the bag, which you could reuse, is harmful for the environment. And like, so it was a moment. It was a moment that I really like, and she seemed like this person that was very like conscious. Now, I may be like making a judgment, and I realize like everyone does their things in different ways and whatever, but I just like, I feel like she lacked perspective. So, and then the other good example, and the other one was not like a single moment necessarily. It's happened on so many occasions. And it's that whole, okay, so how many X number of years ago, plastic straws became the voodoo and like the kryptonite of the environment kind of thing. Like they became, and whatever it was, this documentary or whatever came out, and like plastic straws were the demon. And I didn't watch any documentary, so I can't speak on that. I understand if like they're not recyclable is what I've heard. You know, they're super harmful, XYZ. Cool. I get that. Not cool. But the countless number of times that I have watched people order a drink in their big plastic Starbucks cup, been served the drink with the lid and the straw, which is by standard how Starbucks drinks are served to date, and after the straw and the lid are put on the drink, they will come to us and say, oh, no, I didn't want a plastic straw. Can I have the nitro lid? The nitro lid is the sippy cup straw. And so the Starbucks barista takes off the lid, takes off the straw, throws it in the garbage, and puts on their nitro lid for them. And all I have to say is I really, really hope that that fucking person was doing it because they prefer to drink it out of a nitro lid. Because if they go to me and try and justify the fact that they wanted a nitro lid to save the fucking environment and decided to throw out that it's getting thrown out anyway, then they're fucking out of their mind. Like, just, like, explain that to me. That's just like, OMG. And, like, I will guarantee you that has happened a number of times. And so, you know, and, like, lots of people coming by and, like, when is Starbucks getting rid of their straws? It's like, you're at Starbucks. Like, no. Like, I get it. I can lose perspective on the whole, like, little things that count. True. But, like, 95% of those people don't come with their reusable cups, which they could do. They could bring a reusable cup. They could not have, like, I don't know, but, like, come on. Seriously, guys. So, anyway, I that stuff like irks me, but I get like maybe like I get that I don't have their perspective, but come on, like seriously. And so I guess like I really say all of this to say I just think it's really important to be aware of like the big picture, and just like really think about things, because I think right now plastic has such a negative connotation around it, and I understand it, and I see where people are coming from, and I don't think the big intention is to do harm, but like, what is the next thing gonna be then? The next thing's gonna be like paper, and then like nothing can be made with paper, and it's like, I don't know what's worse, a plastic straw or the fact that you waste the plastic straw out the lid all for another lid, or like a plastic straw, or I use a plastic straw but I don't drive a car. Like, I just think like we lose perspective so quickly, myself included. I've been guilty, been there, done that. But like some of these are just buzzwords, I think. It's like plastic straws now. Next, like it was styrofoam, then it was plastic straws, and like I don't know, maybe it's gonna be aluminum foil next or something. But like I just think in getting so entrenched in these things, like these buzzwords or like negative words, we actually, like, I wonder if people actually have this idea where like everything else is not bad, and it's just plastic straws, and that just doesn't keep the perspective of like what the bigger issue is, which is like what I think can be worked on more effectively is like somehow working to kind of sort of improve or decrease your impact on the environment, which is, I think, where people are trying to go with that. And like it's just super, super interesting. So like I guess my two big things are kind of like moving away from being really egocentric in the way that we approach these issues, in the sense of like trying to take on and have perspective of someone else before you criticize them. And on the other hand, just like, what is the bigger picture of like what we're trying to do, and like, are plastic straws the issue, or is like the wasteful nature of human beings in general the issue, So that's sort of my 2.5 cents. And like I said at the very beginning, I don't claim myself to be an expert by any means. I'm just trying to like throw out my perspective. And I'm really curious what you think. I don't know. I might get some lash for this. I might get some support. I don't really mind either way. So let me know what you think. Thank you so much for listening. Cheers. Ciao.